welcome to the deep dive. So you've sent us a really wide range of sources today. I mean, we've got everything from political controversies that are bordering on sedition to culture wars and even some pretty strange billionaire dating advice.
It's quite a mix.
It is. So our mission today is to really cut through the noise, find that signal, and see how all these seemingly separate stories are, actually connected by this huge erosion of our political and cultural norms.
And that erosion really is the key. What we're seeing is that opponents are no longer just rivals. They're being treated as existential threats to the entire system.
Exactly. And this hyperpolarization is leading to behavior that honestly would have been just unthinkable a few years ago.
Well, let's jump in.
Yeah, We're going straight into the deepest end, maybe the most volatile example of this. Democratic lawmakers speaking directly to the military, telling them to potentially ignore the commander-in-chief.
This is a profoundly serious development. I mean, it really strikes at the heart of the military's non-political structure.
The sources are specific. We're talking about Senator Slotkin, Senator Kelly, and Representatives DeLuzio, Houlihan, and Crow. They filmed a video together.
Right.
In it, they advised service members to refuse illegal orders from the president. And they're obviously referring to Donald J. Trump. The reaction was, well, immediate.
Oh, absolutely. The president called it seditious behavior at the highest level. He was demanding they be arrested, maybe even put on trial.
Right.
But here's the critical point, the thing we have to analyze. The source material makes it very clear that these lawmakers, they failed to name a single specific illegal order. Not one.
And that's the real tension here. Their defense, of course, is that they're citing their oath. They argue soldiers swear an oath to the Constitution, not just to one person.
Which is technically true. Under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, a soldier is required to refuse an illegal order.
Okay.
But when you have senior politicians saying this preemptively, with no legal predicate, no actual order on the table, I mean, it just becomes political rhetoric.
It's designed to sow distrust.
Exactly. It's meant to foment insubordination, maybe even violence, within a base that already sees the president as illegitimate. You're turning a sacred duty into a political pawn and trying to undermine the entire chain of command.
And that idea of undermining structures, it takes us right to the next topic, the establishment divide. Dick Cheney's recent funeral was apparently a perfect snapshot of this internal civil war.
It was a truly symbolic event. I mean, the attendee list was basically a who's who of the institutional political class. You had George W. Bush, Joe and Jill Biden, Mike Pence, Mitch McConnell, Al Gore.
And some surprising names, too. Rachel Maddow and Dr. Fauci.
Right. And the exclusion list was just as telling. President Trump and Senator J.D. Vance were reportedly not invited.
The irony is just staggering. I mean, for anyone who remembers the post-9/11 era, Democrats spent years calling Cheney a war criminal.
Or worse, now they're sharing a pew with him. It's profound, but it tells you everything about the new political architecture. The one unifying principle for that entire class, regardless of history, is standing against Donald Trump.
So because Cheney voted against Trump, he's back in the club.
He's been instantly rehabilitated in their eyes. Today's political identity, it seems, is defined less by what you're for and more by who you're against.
And yet, despite that whole establishment narrative that Trump is a destabilizing force, we had this CNN poll that, well, it tells a completely different story about his foreign policy.
This is that disconnect between the political class and the public. Harry Anton at CNN pointed out that the president's foreign policy approval has, and I'm quoting, skyrocketed. It's up to 43% in his second term.
And just for context, that 43%, that's higher than George W. Bush, who was at 36, and Barack Obama, who was at 37% at the same point in their second terms.
It is. It's a significant number. And the sources suggest it comes from a track record the public sees as successful. Claims of solving 8 wars, successful hostage negotiations.
The perception that he's getting things done without starting new conflicts.
Exactly. The president reportedly hates war. His philosophy is peace first and then engage if you have to second. For a public that's just exhausted by interventionism, that really registers regardless of what the establishment thinks of his methods.
That success abroad doesn't seem to be calming things down at home, though. Let's shift from institutional politics to these escalating culture war zones. starting in Dearborn, Michigan.
Yeah, that incident was extremely volatile. We're talking about anti-Islam protests led by Jake Lang, who you might remember from the January 6th events.
And the banner was Americans Against Islamification.
It got ugly fast. The sources detail pretty aggressive escalations. There's video of Lang rubbing bacon on a Quran.
Which obviously led to immediate clashes, aggressive encounters, spitting, and I think one video even showed a visible firearm on a counter-protester.
Right, and this isn't happening in a vacuum. The local politics there have been very charged. The Muslim mayor of Dearborn was previously on video yelling at a Christian resident at a city council meeting, reportedly telling them, "You're not welcome here."
So that kind of intolerance just fuels the fire on both sides, turns the whole city into a powder keg.
It does, and this domestic tension, it feeds right into these broader, almost existential fears about the future of Western civilization itself. A New York Post story had a really severe warning about infiltration.
This was about the Muslim Brotherhood,
Yeah,
right?
that's correct.
And this idea of a civilization jihad.
Yes. It's a very charged concept, but the sources claim they're actively infiltrating U.S. colleges and cultural institutions.
So what does that reported strategy actually entail? It's not just about transforming society, right? What are the mechanics?
According to the sources, it's not a military strategy. It's a long-game cultural and political infiltration, using Western legal frameworks to stifle criticism, controlling the narrative in education, establishing cultural pressure points to just subtly shift societal norms over generations.
And they're on a 100-year plan, is that right?
Reportedly halfway through it. And you can see why that's concerning when you look at data from Europe. We saw a statistic that 6 in 10 young Muslims in France now prefer Sharia law over French civil law.
Wow. In France, the birthplace of modern secularism.
Exactly, laïcité. If that's being replaced, it highlights the macro stakes. This is why you hear people like Elon Musk talking about converging problems. Mass migration, critically low birth rates. I think the U.S. rate is now 1.58, 1.59, and soaring debt. It all points toward a potential downfall of the West.
Well, speaking of cultural crises, the sources brought up a human rights issue that gets very little attention, but it was highlighted recently by a really unexpected person, the rapper Nicki Minaj.
That's right. She used her massive platform to talk about the extreme persecution of Christians in Nigeria. It's a crisis that's largely ignored by the mainstream media.
And the numbers are just devastating. In 2023, 4,100 Christians were killed there. That's 82% of all faith-based killings worldwide.
And it's getting worse. The sources indicate another 7,000 were murdered in just the first 8 months of this year alone.
Many are calling it a genocide.
They are. The analysis suggests it's escalating as Nigeria gets closer to that 51% Muslim threshold.
So why is the world so slow to react to this? I mean, with a tragedy of this scale.
There are a few theories in the analysis. One, it's politically inconvenient. It doesn't fit neatly into preferred narratives. Two, Nigeria is a huge oil exporter. Global powers want stability in oil flow, not complex interventions. So the media follows the path of least resistance, and this kind of persecution just gets overlooked.
A very sobering thought. Let's pivot now to the underbelly of political power, starting with the man everyone is calling the 2028 Democratic frontrunner, Governor Gavin Newsom.
Newsom is definitely the heir apparent in the media, but his leadership in California is facing huge financial scrutiny.
The sources say California is projecting an $18 billion deficit, which is a stunning collapse from the $24 billion surplus he had when he took office.
A massive swing. Now, California blames this on required spending for education under Proposition 98 and federal funding cuts from the Trump administration.
But the political question is, why is the national media mostly ignoring the fiscal instability of the state led by the person they're anointing as the next nominee?
That is the question, and it makes you wonder about his actual prospects in 2028.
Do you think he'll actually be the nominee?
You know, while he's the frontrunner now, I think the intense, almost socialist energy in the Democratic base might end up favoring an outsider, someone untainted by institutional failure. If the party feels decimated by 28, they might pivot to a radical alternative like an AOC or someone we don't even see coming yet.
Interesting. Okay, from state budgets to personal lives, let's look at billionaire Bill Ackman. He went viral for, of all things, giving dating advice.
Right. He advised young men to just walk up to women and ask, "May I meet you?" And he argued this was necessary because social media has just destroyed spontaneous real-world interaction.
And his motivation was tied back to those same macro concerns we were just talking about: isolation, social fragmentation, and global population decline.
Exactly. While the delivery, from a confident, wealthy billionaire might sound a little out of touch.
A little bit, yeah.
His core point is actually very relevant. He's connecting social collapse to demographic collapse. He's saying confidence is a skill that's atrophied, and the only way to fight isolation is to just get out there and engage.
Don't be boring and don't be absent.
That's the message.
All right, finally, let's get back to high-stakes political scandal. President Trump just signed a bill to release the remaining Epstein files.
And the immediate news cycle focused heavily on Democrats tied to Epstein. You had Congresswoman Plaskett texting him during a congressional hearing.
She claimed he was an informant.
Right, and then that really embarrassing moment where Congresswoman Crockett mixed up the Jeffrey Epsteins on the House floor.
And while all that's happening, a huge foreign influence scandal finally reached its conclusion. Fuji star Praswell was sentenced to 14 years.
This is one of the biggest foreign interference cases in modern history. He illegally funneled somewhere between $21 and $65 million from a Malaysian fund into Obama's 2012 campaign.
A massive amount of money.
Huge. And despite all the years of media focus on Russian collusion, the sources note that the key question here has been almost totally ignored by the mainstream. What did the campaign, and specifically President Obama, know about where all that foreign money was coming from? The imbalance in coverage is really stark.
So if we pull all of this together, the sedition accusations, the establishment civil war, the culture wars over faith and Sharia law, these huge scandals, what's the central insight for you, the listener?
I think the core insight is that the polarization has become so severe, it's not just political conflict anymore, it's ideological warfare. Opponents are no longer just rivals, they are seen as direct threats to the stability and the founding documents of the republic. And when our institutions, the military, state finances, political journalism become weapons in that fight, the entire system is put at risk.
It's clear that to understand all this disruption, you need to understand the motivations behind it. For those who want more insight into the common sense policies driving one side of this divide, we'd recommend checking out Scott Jennings' new book, A Revolution of Common Sense.
And here's a final thought for you to take away from our deep dive today. Given those explicit warnings about a civilization jihad strategy and that shocking statistic that 6 in 10 young French Muslims prefer Sharia law, what is the single most effective non-military strategy a Western government could use today to ensure the long-term preservation of its founding constitutional values? Think about cultural strength, not just political maneuvering.
That is a fascinating challenge to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.